It is a pleasure for me to introduce you for our first speaker is Sergeant Gunsolley of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Sergeant Gunsolley has been with the department for over 20 years, and he is here today to share his insights on fentanyl. Let's all welcome Sergeant Gunsolley. And
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello.
I'm going to share my screen here so that you can. I have a presentation for you. Okay, I think I got all the adjustments done. Now, can you see that it's changing?
Yeah, there we go. Success.
Okay, good. Yay. All right. So here we have this national statistics where we have a spike in that blue line, which is our synthetic opioids. It's taking off. I do want to just look at this. I was looking at statistics from the past, and from 2013 to 2015, this kind of made me realize something like, hey, let's not assume that only our poor areas or underserved areas are at risk, right? The dark areas in this graph of Orange County shows that the drug and alcohol related deaths by city, there's a lot of them along the coast, right? So we definitely don't want to ignore those communities thinking, well, they're fine. They have lots of money. They have lots of resources. We still have issues in every community. The chemicals don't discriminate, right? They can affect anybody who is willing to try them. When it comes to our school districts, again, look on the left there, Santa Ana Unified. A lot of people might think, oh, well, Santa Ana is the place where all the problems are. No, look at our school districts. Self-reported by students in the California Health Kids Survey shows that Laguna Beach Unified has the worst problem as far as 11th graders reporting use of alcohol and drugs. So we certainly don't want to forget about those which we consider maybe more affluent communities. And it's hard to understand how or why these communities are affected more than others. There's a lot of different studies that I've tried to look up and say, well, maybe it's because they have lots of money available to them in Laguna Beach, and they have more, that abundance of money allows them to get to more access to drugs. That's possible. Maybe they have more problems than they realize, but they keep it really hidden behind closed doors. Maybe there is that same stuff like domestic violence and abuse that's going on and things, or lack of supervision for kids. It could all be just the same stuff. It's just, we just assume that it's different there. What are teens using? Teens are, a lot of times they're using the gateway drugs, and that's stuff, once they get started using that, then they head down that road towards the more serious drugs. And the best thing for us to do is once we start seeing some of that use starting, alcohol, the marijuana, prescription pills, and cough medicine, and those things that when they start using that, hey, we need to jump on it at that stage. We don't want this to progress to something more serious, right? And we can also add vaping. Vaping is just that we don't think of it as something that could ever lead to more harder drugs, right? Like fentanyl. But the truth is, nicotine primes the brain for addiction, and it can lead to other things, or it can lead to them being in a social group that then they surround themselves with other kids who are then using or bringing in other things that they could use. And so that's how they end up down that road. Our youth is at risk. On the left-hand side, that graph shows us deaths in Orange County from 2016 to 2021, a 1,600% increase. That's for all deaths related to fentanyl. Now, on the right is Alexander Neville. He's a 14-year-old who's just an example of one of our youth who died from taking a counterfeit pill that I'll talk more about. But I sit on our Orange County Sheriff Coroner's child death review team. And every quarter we sit down and we discuss all the deaths that occurred from all the minors in Orange County. And we review each case and we try and figure out, is there something that we could be doing differently or that we should put in place? Is there a policy change that we can do that can prevent deaths? And it's very important that we review these so that we can understand, one, what's causing our kids, to die, and how do we prevent it? And so our deaths are going up as far as fentanyl use, and they're getting their hands on fentanyl because they think they're taking a different type of pill, and then they're actually getting a counterfeit pill. And that's what I'll talk about here in a minute. But it's now the #1 killer of our kids. It surpassed car accidents and drownings and hangings and suicide and all those other things. It's now our #1 killer of kids is accidental overdoses on fentanyl. So just another statistic about how bad the problem has become. Our deputies and police officers in Orange County carry Narcan with them. I have some that I have here that I carry with me. And what we do is we get deployed, we get sent out, dispatched to cases where kids are overdosing, not just kids, but people in general, right, are overdosing on fentanyl because it's become such a problem. And this just shows that from 2015, we had 3 deployments, and 2021, we now have 117 occurring in that year, and it's going to increase this year as well. What is fentanyl? Fentanyl is a highly addictive and deadly synthetic opioid analgesic used by medical professionals to treat severe pain. It is not being sold. It is now being sold illegally on the streets for people to get high. It used to be just something that the medical professionals used. Now it's something that is being used as a drug to get high. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin. And mostly right now, what we're seeing is that it's being sold as a counterfeit pill. It can be sold as a powder, but a lot of the drug dealers are switching over to pill form because it can kind of be sold to people as something that they're familiar with and that they trust, right? And so if they're hooked on Oxycontin, for instance, and they're out looking for an Oxycontin pill, they can the drug dealer will sell them a fentanyl pill instead that looks like an Oxycontin pill. The people don't know any different. They get high off of it. Problem is, this fentanyl is so potent that there's a chance that they could get poisoned by it accidentally. So people think that they're getting a legitimate pill, but they're actually getting a fentanyl counterfeit pill. And they wouldn't know any different because they look just like the real thing. A lot of our street drugs are fentanyl is being mixed in with them. So if someone is buying heroin or cocaine, methamphetamine, sometimes that fentanyl is mixed in with it. We've even found it in marijuana. In fentanyl, seeing, I think the next slide, that you don't need very much to poison yourself to death, right? So just a little bit added to it could be deadly. So we're seeing it being added to other drugs. The reason why the dealers add it to other drugs is to make it more addicting, make it a better high for people so that they'll come back. It's about business. It's about making money. So they want their users to come back to them. 1, keep them addicted, and 2, make the high better. Also just know that illicit fentanyl, the illegal stuff, is not the same drug that you would get from your doctor or pharmacist, right? This stuff is mixed in with other chemicals. It comes across from sources from Mexico mostly. A lot of times the chemicals are shipped to Mexico, they're mixed together, and then they're made into pill form, and then they're shipped across our border using the networks, the illegal networks that have been there for years, the cartels that have been doing business for years, bringing it across into our country. And then what we do is it gets to our street dealers and then distributed on the streets. The medication that you would get from a doctor is legitimate medication that's made by a pharmaceutical company. So I do want to differentiate between the illegal stuff and the legal stuff. So legal stuff that's just prescribed by a doctor, dispensed by a pharmacy, certainly is safe to use as long as it's used as directed. This is the lethal dose of fentanyl. So it only takes 2 milligrams. So fentanyl in the medical fentanyl is actually prescribed in micrograms. This is when it's being sold on the streets, it's actually being sold as milligrams. So they don't know what they're doing when they're making these pills, and they're potentially putting too much fentanyl in it, right? So they might you might get it thinking, I'm going to get high off this thing, and it's just they ended up getting one that had 2 milligrams of fentanyl in it. So on the right-hand side, you can see the tiny amount of fentanyl that you need for a lethal dose compared to the same lethal dose with heroin. The illegal fentanyl is sold as a pill, like I mentioned, but this is kind of how it works, right? You start off with a binding agent like microcrystalline cellulose. That's something that you can kind of compress together and form into a pill. It's kind of the sticky stuff. And so what they do is they'll take something like a binding agent, they'll put it in a bucket, they'll pour in some fentanyl, stir it all up, and then put it into a pill press and pop out these pills. And pill presses, they can get them illegally. In the United States, they actually have to register the pill presses with the DEA, but in other countries, they don't. And so they end up with these pill presses that make pills that look just like, where they can stamp them and make those pills look legitimate. And this is how it works, how it ends up being a deadly dose. Let's look at this for the dough of this cookie dough. The dough is the binding agent and the chocolate chips is the fentanyl. Okay, so they take that binding agent, they stir in the fentanyl, the chocolate chips there, and then they crank out these pills. And so you can see that they might get this pill here first, and they get high off that pill, and they feel good, and they're like, yeah, this is great. And then they go back to that same dealer, and they're like, hey, let me get another pill from you. I really like your stuff. So then they get this one. You can see that first one didn't have enough fentanyl to cause an overdose, but the second one does. It's just that easy. That's why people are dying off this stuff. They're not intending to die. They are just getting that lethal dose because these are counterfeit pills. Again, a pill press that can just crank out these things. Pill seizures, just another statistic that shows how bad the problem is becoming in Orange County. We have people out there working high-rate interdiction, and this is one of the teams that just gets out there. We use our dogs and other tools to stop cars on the highway that we suspect may be carrying drugs, and then the dog just walk around the car, and sure enough, hits on the drugs. A lot of times, once they get across the border, people think, okay, we're feeling clear, we're past the border. Well, now we have our highway interdiction teams that are out there, kind of similar to what you would do on the border, but looking for those suspicious vehicles that might be transporting drugs. And so here's just one of the seizures that they were able to. Once this deputy is actually really good, he recently promoted, and it's a huge loss. We need to find another person who has that kind of experience and that kind of success. Like this guy's hard charger, and really was finding a lot of drugs out there and getting off the street. So a lot of times enforcement has a lot to do with your skills, right? So this deputy was very skilled in this particular type of work and really took a lot of drugs off the streets. Social media is where these drugs are being sold. Snapchat in particular seems to be the place, because the drugs disappear off, once someone, the conversation disappears, and it's not easy to get. However, just know that if we were to open up a investigation, Snapchat does retain all of the communications. And so we can build a case just by contacting Snapchat and requesting it. We have to have a subpoena and all that stuff has to be all legal. What happens is actually, I have a video here that shows how they get it off of Snapchat.
Sophia says buying drugs is as easy as sending the right emoji to a so-called plug, a dealer who finds customers on apps like Snapchat.
I'm looking for a little plug emoji, or like a fire emoji, or just whatever emoji the normal dealers I have. They're like, yo, hit my line for gas. And then you're like, yo, you got whatever, like slang terms for whatever.
And it can happen that fast, just by communicating on Snapchat and by searching with the right emoji.
If you know where to go, it's really easy.
It's a terrifying new playbook for drug dealing. Now so common, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency releasing this cheat sheet for parents and guardians, showing the emojis commonly used to buy drugs on social media.
I cannot emphasize enough how deadly this drug is to human life, especially to unsuspecting youth in our community. These pills are widely available and are often sold for dollars a piece on social media.
And pictures showcasing how counterfeit pills they've seized from drug dealers look eerily similar to the real medications doctors prescribe. Just days ago, Snapchat issuing a statement detailing their efforts to flush out drug-related content and announcing steps to curb illegal activity, saying they have zero tolerance for the promoting of illegal drugs on their platform.
Okay, just going, this woman that's right in the front there, that's Amy Neville. And I showed you a picture of her son who had overdosed at 14 years of age. She's been going out into the community and really rallying for Snapchat to make some changes in their policy and to stop these drug dealers from being able to operate on Snapchat. So far, they have a lot of talk. They're saying a lot, but they aren't actually doing a whole lot of action. And so that's her thing, is she's getting out there really trying to put some pressure on them and the government to try and do something about this so we can save lives. She's an advocate of working with the community and really getting out and doing a lot of stuff. She's actually been on like CNN and Fox News and doing interviews and stuff and talking about her story with her son. And I've talked to Amy and worked with her on several events. And she told me that she actually had a good relationship with her kid. She had did all the things that parents are supposed to do, right? You give them a hug every day. You tell them that you love them. You spend time with them. You eat dinner together. You do all those things. But one thing is he was using marijuana. And she said that he just came to her because they actually had a good relationship, came to her and said, you know what, I have a problem with, I think it was Percocet. And he'd been using that, kind of got hooked. And he said, I really got hooked bad on this. And so she said, you know what we'll do is we'll get you set up to go and talk to somebody, a counselor, and we'll figure out what we can do about this, you know. And what does an addict do? She didn't know how bad the problem was. Well, that night he reached out on Snapchat, found a pill, ended up with a fentanyl pill when he thought he was getting a Percocet, took it and died that night. And so it's just a very sad story, and also a good lesson for us to learn is that when we deal with someone who's under the influence or is addicted, especially to something like an opioid, we really have to keep an eye on them, right? When we're looking for help, in this case, you know, and that addict brain is just going to say, this is the last time I'm going to get high. I need to get high now. And he went out and he got high, and she is, of course, forever going to have to live with that. Like, she just didn't know that he would do that night, right? And certainly he didn't intend to die. He got a fentanyl pill. He lives in the time of fentanyl. Had it not been the time of fentanyl, she might have had an opportunity to get him off those drugs. But now we don't even have that opportunity anymore, right? Now we have to really be on top of this.
Sophia said,
the ways that people are using these fentanyl pills, what they do is a lot of times when they're actually seeking out fentanyl, they're using it to get high. If they eat these pills, a lot of people are reporting that it causes them to throw up, and they're not getting the high that they wanted if they try and swallow them. So we think of taking pills, you know, orally, we would just swallow them. Actually, what they do is they either crush them up or they put them on a piece of foil like this and they heat them up from underneath. And then what it does is it vaporizes it into a vapor or smoke, and then they breathe it in. And then that gets it directly into the lungs and then into the bloodstream to get them high. So one thing that has been described, and I haven't smelled this because I haven't been out into an investigation with fentanyl, but a narcotics investigator said it smells like burnt popcorn. So if you end up entering a home and you smell burnt popcorn and someone looks like maybe they're under the influence, or you're going into a home and you think that they might be under the influence, and you smell that burnt popcorn, you're being exposed to fentanyl. If you can smell it, you're being exposed to it. You need to evacuate the area immediately and just get the heck out of it. So it's just something to know so that you can keep yourself safe, that it smells like burnt popcorn. Another little video from Dope Stick, and it just shows how another way of using these pills.
never gonna stop. Like, never. It's when one dealer gets caught, there's 5 more waiting to take his spot. Like, this will never stop. As long as there's a demand for pills, they're gonna keep coming.
The devil's pill line. For a person that has an addiction of 20 pills a day, you literally have to go and do crime and steal this and go sell this, and then you start, you know, doing stuff that you never have ever, you know what I mean, thought of doing when you were normal, when you weren't on these pills.
23. It's been 5 years that I've been addicted to these pills. It scares me sometimes to think about what's gonna happen. I kind of just live day to day. Panhandle every day, try and make my money. Try and make sure I'm not sick.
So it shows you how how it just takes hold of people, right? We have a little bit of an echo. Is somebody's microphone on? So another way that they use is by injecting. And what they do is they melt down the pill, kind of just what the same old way that people do with heroin. They'll melt it down, and then by heating it up underneath, maybe with a spoon, and then using some type of filter, like this is a cigarette butt on the right, where they use a cigarette butt, they soak it up into, or they suck it up into a syringe, the liquid, and then they inject it. Signs and symptoms of opioid overdose. Small constricted pinpoint pupils. So this is if someone's under the influence, their pupils become very tiny, unusually tiny, right? They're falling asleep or have loss of consciousness, slow and shallow breathing. Sometimes that breathing is ineffective. They might breathe a little bit here and there, the respirations are just too slow to support life. And so their skin may turn pale or blue or be cold. Body becomes limp. They might be choking or gurgling, might have gurgling sounds. For dark skin, skin may appear gray, and for light skin, it may appear blue. A lot of times when someone is using, what happens is they go on the nod. And this is where they just kind of lean over and go unconscious, but they're still breathing. They're still able to, their life is, they're still alive, but it's just kind of unusual. Like this picture on the left, these 3 people are probably just used, and now they're on the nod. They're actually standing, kind of just tipped over like this. You show you this video real quick of Nod, who is able to stand at the same time. Saw this just yesterday driving by a park. This is not that same picture from the park, but I saw something similar. Every day when I drive home, getting on the 5 freeway, you can usually see it in Santa Ana, first in the 5. There's a group of drug addicts that hang out down there, and this is pretty typical, which you can see. So that's somebody on an opioid. Just in general, drug use, for an opioid or something like a depressant, it's going to cause your eyes to become pinpoints. For stimulants, it causes the eyes to become really big, the pupils of the eyes to become very big. So methamphetamine and cocaine will cause the pupils to almost fill in the whole eye, the whole color of the eye. There's usually changes that you start to see in people who are using. They won't admit to drug use, right? So no one's going to go up and say, yeah, I'm using drugs. You're going to have to kind of watch for signs and symptoms that are, some changes in them, such as poor hygiene, changes in appearance, glazed or bloodshot eyes, frequent runny noses or nosebleeds, even white, powder around their nose or something. They're paranoid, irritability, anxiety, fidgeting, changes in mood or attitude. It's just altering the body's functions, right? And so you'll start to notice something, and that'll make you suspicious. Okay. Some behavioral symptoms that we'll see, like avoiding eye contact, ignoring or breaking curfew for kids, acting irresponsibly, frequently asking for money, stealing. That's a big common problem when I was working as a school resource officer, where parents are like, stuff is just being missing out of my house. They come and report it to me because maybe I have a connection, they're at school and like, hey, I want to report a theft from my house or just something suspicious, and their jewelry is missing. And I go, okay, does your son or daughter use any drugs? No, of course not. Okay, are you sure? Because that's the first place I would look if I were you, because let's look into this a little closer, because maybe your child is using and you're just unaware of it, and we need to certainly jump on that. That's a bigger problem. Money can be replaced, their life cannot. Being secretive, missing school, not doing well in school. A lot of times what happens, especially with teens, is if a parent suspected drug use, I would say, okay, let's look back at their grades. When did they start to slip? Well, they were a straight A student up to a certain grade, and then that's when the grades started to decline. And that's when we could usually say that's about when they started using. So that gives us an idea of how far down the road they are. Okay. Also surrounding themselves with other drug users. So oftentimes we know when someone else, so if I have my child and I think the world of my child, but they're hanging out with people who are using drugs and I'm concerned about that. Well, the other concern you should have is that my kid might be using too. The biggest predictor of your child using drugs is they're hanging out with other drug users. What to do if you suspect drug use? Drug use occurs where denial exists. That's something that I've kind of realized over time in working with the community. Denial is where the person who's using is denying that they have a problem with it. The people around them denies that there's a problem, or ignore the problem. And when that happens, that gives drug use and addiction an opportunity to exist. If you suspect drug use, you need to look for evidence, which means you need to do drug tests. You need to search bedrooms and backpacks and things like that, just to like, hey, let's find that evidence so that we have something concrete. Let's find out what kind of drug it is. We don't want to just go on suspicion alone. And addiction starts as a choice and becomes a disease. Certainly, we need to get the help. Like if you break an arm, you go to a doctor, there's a treatment plan for that. Well, there's a treatment plan for this disease also. Biggest problem is that it requires the user's cooperation. And that's where the challenge is, right? And it's also hard work. It takes
Sergeant Gunsolley,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interject. We have about 5 more minutes for this portion.
Okay.
Are we able to?
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, yep. Don't assume the problem will go away on its own. It progressively gets worse. Start by talking with your healthcare provider. That's a good place to start and get some help, get some resources. And if you suspect that there's opioid use that might be occurring, then get Narcan in your house immediately. Have that on hand, because in the time we're living in the time of fentanyl, you have to be careful with that. I think Mr. Brown's going to be talking about responding to an overdose. So I will pass over that. And do you just want to say, especially for the parents and people who work with teens, is that this is one study that I came across that was kind of interesting. And we talk about like poor self-esteem, and that's a big driver of people using drugs. Well, it turns out on this study, low correlation and high correlation of the risk factor for using drugs. Poor self-esteem is the lowest. And then the number 10 at the bottom is pure drug use. So again, kids using, if your kid is hanging out with other drug users, it's likely that they're also using. So it's very important that you kind of look into and kind of get a handle on that. But if you were to take some of these other factors and add them all together, that would increase the ultimate risk that they're using. And so one of the things is deviant behavior. You know if your kid has deviant behavior. Other adults that are in their life, like parents themselves that are using drugs or older siblings, might be a concern, right? That'll increase that risk and also give them access. Just some resources that are out there. If anybody wants to look more into it or needs to find more resources, on the right are just some resources for Orange County. There are many, many great resources out there. I do want to caution you about making sure that you do good research. We have what's called body brokering going on, which is where a rehab doesn't actually want to help someone get off their drugs. What they want is just their insurance money. So they'll accept them into the program, they'll keep them there for 30 days, get their insurance money, and then kick them out, but actually have no plan on getting them off drugs. In fact, they'll probably provide them drugs while they're in the program. And then they just rotate another person into that bed. And it's a horrible thing that's going on. It's called body brokering.
Solly, very, very informative. And I would like to touch very briefly on the body brokering. I had a firsthand experience of that when I first moved to the area, and I was just floored that was even occurring. So yeah, a huge problem. Lots of information, just a phenomenal job. I didn't realize how many things that I didn't know about fentanyl, and especially the risk factor drug chart that you showed at the end. I found very helpful and informative. Are there any questions for Sergeant Gunsolley before we move along? Well, I could probably have a couple questions. So I heard a couple of themes, and I don't know if it's myth or not. Is it true that you should not use hand sanitizer if you have potentially been exposed to fentanyl by touch contamination?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So fentanyl, if you suspect that something might have fentanyl in it, then you certainly don't want to touch it. But if you do touch it, it doesn't go through your hands as easily or readily as we thought it does. But what it does is if you do have it on your hands, you just want to wash it off with soap and water. If you feel like you got exposed and that you're having some difficulty breathing, or you feel lightheaded or some change, then you want to make sure that you have some Narcan nearby, or you call 911 and get somebody en route to help you out. Otherwise, you can just wash it off with soap and water. Now, if you use hand sanitizer, what it does is it opens up the pores and it allows whatever's on your hands to seep into it, and then it could cause an accidental exposure.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, a good piece of information. Another question that I had was, how are we holding the street level dealers accountable, and the Good Samaritan law perspective of, hey, my brother is ODing, I'm high, I'm calling 911, and now I'm in trouble. Is there?
Yeah, so California has a Good Samaritan law. And what that means is that if you are at a party or something, for example, and you have someone who's overdosing, you can call 911. The police will likely respond to help save the life, but they can't charge anybody with the crime. They will probably, and they will, collect all the drugs on scene, because we don't want another overdose and leave that behind. But we're not going to charge anybody with the crime as long as it's for a medical reason, right? Someone overdosing. And that the people have to be cooperative with the police. You can't show up and then not let us in the door or something like that. Then we are allowed to charge people with the crime if we have to now kick in the door to go and save that person's life.
Yeah,
we should just have easy access to saving that life. So yes, that Good Samaritan exists in law.
Awesome. Go ahead, Riley.
So Eileen and I were kind of talking when you were going through your PowerPoint, and we were just kind of like, how come kind of all of a sudden has fentanyl been why is it being intermixed into everything? Is it, why is it all of a sudden everything has fentanyl in it? Why can't it just be here's a Percocet? Why is it laced with fentanyl all of a sudden? And do people know that, they're giving this out type of thing, or are they just getting it from other dealers and they're passing it out on the street and like it's like, oh, we don't even know that this isn't a Percocet, it's laced with fentanyl? Or like, I think we're just like, is it like easier to like cheaper to make with fentanyl? Is it like just kind of like, filling, up the rest of it, or so
yeah, it's a good question. So it comes down to business. It just is something that they can, because it's so potent, you can make more pills with it than something that's less potent, right? So you get more, you can sell more pills, you can make more money. The other thing about fentanyl is that legislatively, we don't have a severe penalty for fentanyl like we do methamphetamine or cocaine. And our legislators in California, they currently don't want to lock more people up. They actually want to release more people from prison if they can. And so with that philosophy, it's hard for us to get some legislation that's passed to help us arrest people who are in possession of large amounts of fentanyl. And so what we tend to be doing right now is charging people with murder who have sold that deadly pill to somebody. And so, but you have to have a lot of ducks in a row in order to actually charge someone with murder. That means that when they got arrested for another crime that was related to drugs, they were then admonished. So not just arrested, but when they were convicted, the DA will give them have them sign something saying, hey, if you now know that if you sell drugs in the future, your drugs could kill somebody. And then when that happens, we can actually charge them with the crime. So we're putting things in place to be able to actually do that. Not a lot of people actually have been convicted of this, but there's a lot in process, a lot of people being charged. Which sad is that, these dealers don't intend to necessarily kill their customers, right? It's happening. They know that possibility is there, but they're still doing it. And that's why it's kind of a hard thing to prosecute, is because did they actually have the intent of killing? Although they did know that it was possible. So that's really where we're getting, to maybe put a little scare into that world. But for the most part, we don't have a good penalty for people who are out there selling drugs, selling fentanyl.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your insight and your expertise in this area. I know I, for one, have no experience of seeing anybody doubled over on the street. And I liked to hear that you are carrying that Narcan nasal spray with you just in case. I know I personally ordered one recently because I would like to also carry that. And speaking to Narcan, we also have with us today Anthony Brown. And I would like to welcome now Anthony Brown. He has a Bachelor of Science degree from Cal State Fullerton, and he's a registered nurse who will be sharing with us on Narcan and naloxone, followed by a demonstration of the proper procedure for administering in the event of an overdose. And let's welcome today Anthony Brown.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Sergeant Gunsolley. You did my lecture for me. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with everyone and go from here. Okay. Let's see here. If I can get this thing to work. Okay. Again, as Justine said, my name is Anthony Brown. I have a Bachelor of Science of Nursing degree. I'm a public health nurse, a registered nurse, a licensed psychiatric technician, and a certified addiction treatment counselor, third level nurse, and a certified anger management facilitator. I'm also a teacher at Cypress College in the Health Science Department, and I'm going to go over some of the things about Narcan and how to administer it and what to do. I'm going to try not to get too sciencey on you, because I think science and I think pharmacodynamics and I think neurotransmitters and things of that nature because that's where everything basically happens. And one of the things I want everyone to understand is what's more important than anything is that you're able to stay calm in an emergency situation. Because you only have an X amount of time, roughly 6 minutes from oxygen stop going to your brain before your brain starts to suffer some damage. And so everybody just learn how to stay calm. You can always do some breathing exercises, but always tell myself or tell other people, as soon as you hit an emergency situation, the very first thing you do is take a deep breath. Get some oxygen into your brain so that you can focus, because automatically your body's gonna go into fight or flight mode automatically. Anytime you encounter any situation, anything stressful, your adrenaline's gonna go flowing, epinephrine and norepinephrine gonna happen, and your heart rate's gonna increase, and your blood vessels are gonna constrict, all of those things. But what's important is your sense of logic is gonna decrease. You'll get tunnel vision. Your lack of reasoning will go out the window. And the more stress you encounter, if you're not used to it, the less you're going to think about a situation. So I want to give you a quick 5-step method of how to think in case of an emergency situation that you run into. In the beginning, it takes time for an overdose to become fatal, but it's also possible you have the same amount of time to reverse the respiratory depression that opioids affect. And that's what happens. People usually die from opioid-induced respiratory depression. People don't realize that the same type of receptor, immune receptor, that an opiate goes after to relieve pain, it actually attaches to your respiratory system that slows down your respiration as well. And so when people are trying to alleviate pain, their breathing slows and gets shallow. And for those people who are overdosing, they put too much of that medication that's attaching to that receptor. And what Narcan does, it pretty much removes that metabolite off that receptor so that they can breathe again. And so again, I'm trying not to get too nursey on you, but I want you to understand how this medication works, because for some people, you will give them Narcan and the strength of the opiate that they took would be more than what that Narcan can do, and they will stay in that respiratory depression. And so that's why I want to give you some 5 steps on how to deal with even that situation. And I call it 5 steps for success. Anytime that you arrive on the scene and you see anything, whether you hear a noise in the background of your house and you walk into the bathroom and one of your loved ones are down, or if you're at church and somebody falls over, if you see that person, you are the first responder. You're the first person that's going to respond. I try to highly encourage everybody to take CPR so that you can go through that in case whatever's happening and you give them a Narcan and it's not successful, then you can move on to the next level to assist that person. And so again, I encourage people to make sure that they take CPR classes and things of that nature. And so the very first thing you're going to do in any situation, regardless, is you're going to dial 911. You are. And the reason why you want to dial 911 is if you get into a situation that gets over your head and you can't resolve that situation, at least you got help coming. Once you give somebody Narcan and that opiate comes off that receptor site and they come back to life, no one knows what condition they're going to come back to life on. They can be angry, they can get more sick, they can go into seizures, all kinds of other variables do happen, but at least you know that you have backup coming. So it's important that you do that. A lot of times people will take it upon themselves, well, I'll give Narcan and just wait around. Well, what if they go into full cardiac arrest? What are you going to do? What if they have a seizure? For us medical people, and we're just like, okay, it's a seizure, I can deal with that. But for people who have not, then that becomes an emergency. If they come back and they happen to be eating something when they passed out or when they overdosed, the very first thing you're going to do is when that opioid comes off of your lungs, you're going to take a deep breath, and that increases the risk of you aspirating on whatever's in your mouth, whether it's gum or whatever. So you definitely want to make sure you have help coming. Again, I just explained that you want to get medical expertise to see the patient as soon as possible. If no emergency medical services is there, you dial 911. you get specific. Usually when you dial 911, the very first thing they're going to say is 911, what is your emergency? That's the very first thing they're going to ask you. Okay, again, remember I said your adrenaline is going to be flying. You need to be able to say, look, someone is not breathing. Okay, just get as specific as you can. Make sure you know where you are, at least a corner or something like that, because a lot of times people, they'll ask, well, what's your location? I know that once you dial 911, there's a tracking device that gets activated, I think. I think Sergeant Gunsolley would know more about that than I do. But they can find where you are, but you want to tell them where you are. Okay, so you want to dial 911, and you want to say, hey, somebody's not breathing. Even if you're unsure, it's better to be safe than sorry. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so after that, then you're going to check for signs of opioid overdose. Again, Sergeant Gunsolley went over some. I'm going to probably repeat it again. And there's a difference between over-medicated and overdose. And I'm going to show you the two differences. In signs of overdose, which often results in death if not treated, you're going to have extreme sleepiness, inability to awaken verbally or upon the sternal rub. What's the sternal rub? You take your knuckle and you just rub it on their chest as hard as you can. Okay. And usually if I'm doing a class with a bunch of people, I'll have everybody do it to themselves, but I'm not going to give you guys a demonstration of that. But it does hurt and it is quite painful. Also, another thing you can do is a cuticle pinch. If you look at somebody's cuticle on their finger, you take your fingernail and you drive it into that cuticle, they should have pain. They should respond. Okay, if none of those happen, again, you assess the situation. You look at the fingernails, see if there's any blue or purple, because that shows a sign of lack of oxygen. Pinpoint pupils occur again. The heartbeat is slow and there's low blood pressure. Very few people are going to sit there and take a pulse other than somebody that's a nurse. Okay, but as lay people, understand that you have a difficult situation going on, but the best thing is you've already dialed 911. Okay, and so again, you're looking at this, you're going, okay, well, if this is happening, then what's next? This is an overdose. This is somebody just over medicated. There's a big difference. They might have took too much of something and their respirations haven't got to the point where it's going to cease pretty soon. They're usually sleepy, drowsy, difficult, staying awake. You can see someone starting to go towards an overdose, like those people that he showed the video that are nodding and leaning over and things like that. If those individuals take any more of a chemical, especially a CNS depressant, there's pretty much a high probability that their system's going to shut down. People don't realize the amount of things out there that have CNS. When I say CNS depressants, what I mean is something that's going to slow down your central nervous system. People can drink cough syrup and that'll slow down their central nervous system. People can have asthma and their breathing can slow down, and that helps increase people or put them at risk for respiratory issues. And so all of these things are going on. Alcohol slows down your CNS depressant. Anti-anxiety medication, there's a host of things out there. So we really have to be careful when somebody gets to this point. You're going to see mental confusion. They're not going to know who they are. One of the things you can always ask somebody, something simple is, do you know where you are? Just ask them, do you know where you are? Do you know what day it is? And see how they respond to those things. They'll have intoxicated behavior. They'll have a staggering gait, or they'll be walking funny, things of that nature. One of the things I've trained myself to do, and since we're all professionals or even lay people, establish a pattern in someone that you deal with. We normally see it, but we don't pay attention to it, but we know what somebody looks like normally. And if you suspect something that's abnormal, feel free to start questioning and investigating, because again, there's such a high prevalence of people taking fentanyl, it's getting outrageous. And sometimes people's tolerance will build up to the point where they just continue to take so much, and next thing you know, they take too much and a problem happens. Extremely small pinpoint pupils, he showed you pictures of that. Normal sized pupils do not exclude opioid overdose. Slow heart rate, again, difficult waking the person up from sleep, but at least you do wake them up. In an overdose, they usually don't wake up. You can literally pick up their limb and drop it, and it'll fall back on the ground. That's when you know you have a problem going on.
Anthony, can I interject real quick? I am hugely interested in the application of the Narcan. I thought that there was only the liquid that required like syringe use, but it's my understanding now that there's a nasal application. And are you able to speak to that?
Yes, that's in the presentation.
Okay, okay.
Yes, there's several forms or several applications, and that's probably step number 4. Okay, I want people to get help. I want people to know that there is an overdose, and then since it is an opioid-induced respiratory problem, we need to support somebody's breathing. That's really important. And so part of supporting breathing is they can be ventilated with oxygen prior to the administration of naloxone, because again, we want to make sure they get oxygen to their brain. We want to do that. A lot of times people might not be comfortable with doing ventilations. That's okay. In CPR, now we tell people just start doing compressions because people don't want to do ventilations. But if it's your loved one laying on the floor, we need to get oxygen to them. And so the effective way of doing rescue breathing, here's a few steps. Make sure that person's airway is clear. You can look in their mouth. If you can't find nothing, don't put your fingers down there because you can lodge it in their throat. If there's gum or a sandwich or something in there, get that out. Maybe that might help their breathing. You place one hand under, not on, but under the chin, and you tilt the head back and you pinch the nose closed. Then you place your mouth on theirs and then breathe in until you see their chest rise. Okay. Again, we want to do everything we can to just get oxygen to that person. If you're too nervous to do all of that, and the only thing you can do is dial 911 to give Narcan, then dial 911 and give Narcan. Okay. But the more you rehearse this stuff, the more it becomes second nature, and then you can do that. And each breath should be every 5 seconds. Rescue breathing is one of the most important steps in preventing an overdose death, because again, we're not having any oxygen going into their body and into their nervous system, and to their brain. And so we need to do that. And I've already reiterated that make sure that there's nothing in their mouth blocking their airway. Because if you give them Narcan and they take a deep breath, they will aspirate on this stuff. They will suck it right down their windpipe. And then you're going to have another problem. You're going to have a choking issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is some demonstrations on how that happens. If you notice this lady's position, okay, what's really important is you never, ever straddle anybody in an overdose case, ever. Because if you're on top of that person and you give them Narcan, they're going to jump up and they're going to push you away. At least this lady has room to escape if she has to. That's really important, because sometimes people wake up really combative. And again, this is a quick CPR guideline. If you don't know CPR, you do compressions 2 inches on the breastplate 100 times per minute, and then you do 2 pops, then back to compressions again. This isn't a CPR class, but I just wanted to make sure or go through the typical algorithm on how to do that. Because again, a lot of times, and I see it happening, and it sort of scares me. People think, oh, I have Narcan, I'm just going to give it to them and everything's going to be fine. No, there's more to it than meets the eye. It is. So the part everybody's been waiting for, how to administer this stuff. Okay. Narcan comes in different dosage packages, okay? There's the IM kind where you can draw up a needle, mostly in hospitals. Paramedics might have it. We have it's sort of like an electronic muscle injector kind that you pull the top off and the needle come out, and you just pretty much inject into a large muscle. And then you have 2 types of nasal administrations. You have the 1 milligram syringe that's already pre-filled. Then you have the 4 milligrams that everybody is running around with today. I'm going to go through those. And this is the 4 milligram that everybody has, that I see more prevalent out there. How to use it. You pretty much just peel off the back. You place the nozzle in one of their nostrils and you just push the button. The beauty about being in panic mode is you're going to do everything excessive. So don't worry about just barely pressing it. I guarantee you, when you're stressed out, you're going to push that really hard. You might even push it too far up their nose. It doesn't matter. What we want is that medication to go into their nasal cavity so that it can be absorbed into the system. Okay, what you see here, she has a 1 milligram pre-filled syringe. It looks a little different than the 4 milligrams that you guys have that's out there now. When they first came out with Narcan, everybody was getting these 1 milligram kits. The problem was people were getting, it took them too long to assemble the kit. And I'm glad they came out with the 4 milligrams because this is only 1 milligram. You're going to give them now 4 times the amount of what that one was given them. For opiate naive patients, maybe given a starting dose up to 2, without concern of triggering withdrawal symptoms, depending on the route of administration. It used to be, we just want people to start breathing. We didn't want them to go into withdrawal. With 4 milligrams, they're going into withdrawal. The only thing is because the opiates, especially if they were getting Vicodin or some sort of medication from the hospital for pain relief, Narcan is going to pull off every molecule of opiate off of every receptor in their body. And so if they have a broken leg, they're going to feel that broken leg as soon as you give them Narcan. Okay? And they're going to be in pain, but guess what? You already called 911 in the beginning. So it doesn't matter. Help is on the way. We could give an intramuscular route for patients that have an overdose. There's a kit out there. It's an electronic kit, and you just pull the top off, and it'll tell you what to do, and then you can give it in their muscle. But people in a state of panic were getting needle sticks somehow, or forgetting to. People just panic. So this way, it's a lot easier. It's a lot user-friendly. 4 milligrams, just put it in their nose, and even if you miss their nose and squirt it on the side of their face, most kits come with 2 of them, and it is 4 milligrams. The duration of Narcan. The duration of effect is usually from 20 to 90 minutes, depending on the dose and route of administration and overdose symptoms. Depending on the frequency of the drug use, what the drug was, and how long they did it. Because what occurs on a neurochemical thing is you have a bunch of opiate metabolites just floating around waiting for a place to occupy. One occupies receptor site, and then it hangs on to it, and you have the analgesic effect. You have the respiratory suppression effect. Once that metabolite reaches that spot and does what it does, then it falls off and another one replaces it. When you do a bunch of opiates, what you have is a bunch of metabolites just hanging around those receptor sites. So as soon as one falls off, another attached. What Narcan does, it has a stronger affinity, so it will occupy that site so the opiate that's floating around won't be able to attach to it. The only problem is your body is going to use up that Narcan and get that off the site. And if you don't have enough of it in your system, that opioid will go right back to the same site and do the same thing. And that's how people re-overdose again. So it's really important to understand that. And I'm going to explain to you why we do that. But usually it sticks on that receptor site anywhere from 20 to 90 minutes. You administer 1 dose intramuscularly or nasally, one half in each nostril. Again, you're just going to push the whole thing in. It should start to work in between 1 to 3 minutes. In an emergency situation, 1 to 3 minutes seem like a long time. Just take a deep breath. Okay, allow the first one to see if it's going to be effective. Some people, again, panicky, and that's why I ask you to take a deep breath in the beginning, because some people will do one right after the other. It's like, no, let's wait from 1 to 3 minutes. If it doesn't work in 3 minutes, then you give the second dose. Okay, I'm not going to say you sit around and look at your watch and wait 3 minutes, but give it a reasonable amount of time. Again, if Narcan is not going to work, or if it's just partially effective and it only worked for 20 seconds, overdose will occur again. Because remember, I told you that receptor site is going to become unoccupied, and that opiate floating around in the synaptic gap is going to attach to it. But guess what? You've already dialed 911. You have emergency help coming. And again, that's what it looks like. That's what everybody's getting. These are 4 milligram loading doses. That is a lot of Narcan, a lot. But as I said before, if that person has any kind of broken bone or any pain because of that initial opioid prescription, all of that is coming out of their system. Number 5, you're going to monitor the person's response. All patients should be monitored for reoccurrence of signs and symptoms of opioid toxicity for at least 4 hours from the last dose of Narcan or discontinuation of the infusion. Patients who have overdosed on long-acting opioids should have more prolonged monitoring. Methadone is a long-acting opioid. Okay, methadone will hang on to that receptor site like there's no tomorrow. And so with buprenorphine too. That's another one that has really strong affinity. So again, usually within 4 hours, you've already had the paramedics come. They've already done their thing. Your job is finished, and the paramedics will take over and go from there. But if someone is doing it like they're afraid to notify emergency and things like that, and they want to try to, ride it out, they have to monitor somebody for at least 4 hours, at least. Most patients respond by returning to spontaneous breathing. The response generally occurs in 3 to 5 minutes of administration. If you have to, continue rescue breathing until the Narcan take effects. So once you give that dose and nothing happened, and you still don't see any breathing, still do a couple breaths and then go ahead and administer the second one. Again, I already said 20 to 90 minutes. It's essential to get the person or emergency department or other source of medical care there. I've already explained that in the beginning. I just go over that big time because a lot of times people will just say, okay, Narcan's done, I saved somebody's life, and then walk away. And that person go right back into that overdose state again. And then that's, then we have death, and a lot of people wonder, well, what happened? People wake up from overdose differently. There's some violent reactions of waking up from an overdose, even though some are rare. They're usually confused, but people have been known to get up and just strike out because they're scared. They're coming from a place of blackness, and all of a sudden they're up again. A lot of times people don't even know they overdose. They don't. And all of a sudden they wake up and it's like, what happened? And so again, if they're confused, if they're violent, whatever the case may be, at that point, you should be hearing sirens, and you can go, hey, listen to this. You hear that? Okay, you got backup coming. A lot of times, unfortunately, in some treatment, some recovery houses, people will go through that and not notify the police, and it's kind of sad, some of the outcome. So we try to educate everybody, please call for help first, and then go through and do everything else. Sometimes, people with addictive behaviors, they'll think, oh, that was great. And they'll try to look for more drugs to take again. As Sergeant Gunsolley said, when the police arrive, they're going to take all that stuff anyway. And so you can tell that individual's like, you know what? Unfortunately, that ride is over. Plain and simple. Thank God that you're alive, and let's try to get some treatment or deal with this, because I don't want this repeat behavior to happen wherever I'm at. All right, talked about the 20 to 90 minutes. Again, you stay with the person and wait it out just in case they go back into the re-overdose because the drug is still there. People can have uncomfortable withdrawal feelings. Some people will get sick. Some people will have, they'll lose body fluids because the opiates themselves slow down and stopped all of that stuff. So usually everything that you happen in an opioid overdose is going to have a reverse effect. And so if everything was slowed down, everything's going to speed up. And so that's one thing, and they're not going to like it,
Anthony, I'd like to interject here that we have about 5 more minutes, and then we'll need to wrap it up.
Okay, I'll be done in less than 5.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and so again, we have to look out for the long-acting opioid like methadone. Recap the 5 things: call for help, check for signs of opioid overdose, support the breathing, give naloxone, and then monitor the response. This is just a little quick thing. Most of those nasal Narcans come with instruction books, and these are on that instructions. For people who don't respond to it, then probably it's not an opiate overdose. You know, it could be something else. And that's why I encourage people to take CPR just in case you have to go to that mode, but you already have 911 coming and things of that nature. Some of the do support the person, do administer naloxone, do put them in a recovery position, turn them on their side in case there's a lot of vomit and things like that. It can just come out of their mouth. Do stay with the person and try to keep them warm. Some of the don't slap them. You know, a lot of times people just get really crazy. If you're unable to rub somebody from either the sternal rub or the pinching, then you just can't get them that way. Don't throw them into a cold bath of water because they're going to drown. Don't try to inject them with any other substances. You know, don't try to make them vomit to get the drug up. Don't do any of that stuff. Just go by the simple 5 things that I outlined and you should be okay. Last details, protect Narcan from direct sunlight, check the expiration date, and then AB 635 Overdose Treatment Act. I think Officer Gunsolley talked about that a little bit, that if somebody overdosed and the police come, they're not going to really do nothing, just get you, get all the drugs out, things of that nature. And so that's it. That's me.
Thank you so much. That was wonderfully informative. And I just wanted to thank our speakers today. And if you would be okay, Anthony, to receive any questions, if anybody in the audience has any questions, might they be able to email me and I can forward them along? Would that be okay?
That is okay.
Perfect. And that's almost all the time we have. We also have, if you would like to share a little bit, Robin, about Recovery Road, very briefly, about what you do there.
We are a recovery community center in Anaheim. I manage the Anaheim Alana Club, an AA club. So I've administered naloxone many times. I have naloxone over at the Anaheim Alana Club. If anybody needs any, you can go over there. You can call me. I can get it to you guys. You guys can pick it up. But in Anaheim, we're a community center for people in recovery. So we see people on the other side when they've got that foot in the door and they want recovery. We've got a computer room, 1,000 square foot food room. We're here to help with all the needs that we can. But as far as the Narcan goes, I want to make sure it's something that I don't know if I maybe missed it. I had to get up a couple of times. Naloxone is completely safe. You can give it to an infant. So don't worry about giving too much. If they are waking up a little bit, sometimes we have to do more than 2 doses because of the fentanyl being so strong. So I carry all the time, at least 4 to 6 on my person most of the time. And then I always have it in the car and close by.
Thank you for that. Great information. And yeah, Recovery Road Resource Center in Anaheim. Thank you so much to our speakers. And if there are any questions for either Sergeant Gunsolley or for Anthony Brown, feel free to email them to me and I can send those along and try and get you some answers.
And can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I love Anthony. He's the one that taught me CPR. And if I want to start having a class once a month here at Recovery Road. Can I send you guys the information and you guys can share it as well?
We would love to share that with our partners.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so to chime in real quick, thank you so much, everybody, for speaking. And so we were trying to be respectful of time, but if people do want to stick around and we have any quick questions or anything, we can definitely answer that now. And then if not, we can follow up after with the speakers and send it out in the follow-up. Because I did want to be respectful of time since it is about 5 o'clock, but if people are willing to stay, we are more than welcome. I am so appreciative of everybody for this because it was neat. It's interesting to see what's going on in the streets, right? Like how to recognize it, what's happening, how to treat it, and then some resources that are out there. And Robin, thank you so much for offering to open your doors to us. Hopefully if anyone wants to come for a tour or check out more about Robin, what Robin's doing, please reach out to her. There are a lot of recovery programs in the community. I saw Ferris camera come on. I know she's part of that community as well over there. And there is an Orange County collaborative meeting that they meet on the first Tuesday of the month in Anaheim, actually at Robbins Place at Recovery Road, right? And they have hybrid and stuff. So we'll send out that information to you. So if anyone's interested to continue getting involved in this network and learn about it, that sort of stuff, we'll send out that information as well. But yeah, so in the meantime, again, if people are willing to stay, our speakers, if you guys are willing to stay real quick, we can open it up for questions if anyone has any questions right now.
Megan, may I chime in? This is Farrah Bailey. Hi, so I'm Farrah Bailey. I have a nonprofit called Forever Free. We focus on harm reduction in the community. Great presentations, everyone. There's one thing that wasn't touched on that I would love to bring to attention, and that is these. This is rapid response fentanyl test strips. So on a harm reduction level, these are now made legal. They were considered paraphernalia up until recently, and I don't remember the proposition that passed to make them so that you could carry these on you. But I pass these out on the regular. What you can do is actually test your supply so that you can make an educated decision. Yes, we don't want people using. You know, we want everyone to be clean and sober. We want everyone to be safe. But the reality of it is until they're ready, they're not going to stop. So what we can do is help keep people safe. And by handing out these fentanyl test strips, it allows them to be able to test their supply and know whether or not they're going to be ingesting fentanyl. So it helps reduce the amount of mix-ups. Unfortunately, our meth, our other drugs are being laced highly with fentanyl at the moment. So if anyone is in need of access to any of these fentanyl test strips or Narcan, you can reach Forever Free. I did put my information in the chat box, and I'd be more than happy to get more of these out in the community as it really does save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Farrah. Okay, well, I see people starting to leave too. So again, I know it is the end of the day, but is there any other questions for our speakers? And like I said, if not, you can follow up with us after and we'll send it to our speakers to get information out to everybody. And for those that are here, real quick announcements on our end. For H.I.R.E, we do have our next subcommittee meeting. Our women's subcommittee meeting will be on August 9th at 2:30 online. We're going to be talking about family reunification. And then we do have a fun virtual paint night scheduled for August 26th. So hopefully you guys can join us on that and come paint and that sort of stuff. So real quick, want to get into our announcements. But anyone else for questions? And if not, I thank everyone for coming. This was a great meeting, great turnout, and we really appreciate the information.